All right, I need to address a lot of the hate from my video this week. So I talked about Teslas and buying them from Hertz used because they're such a good deal and they're so cheap. Let me add some context to that in this video. So we're gonna talk about more specifically these Hertz cars, Tesla prices overall. Cat right now is knocking things over, and if you should get these cars and what the process is like. Oh my goodness, she just stole my. Okay, now that the cat is taken care of, we're gonna also talk about generally when you're buying a used car, how it differs buying it from a rental fleet and buying it off a private party and buying it from a dealership. So it's gonna be kind of a mixture of things. We're gonna talk Tesla, we're gonna talk Hertz, and then we're gonna talk about used cars in general. So let's get into it. If you didn't see my last video, linked here, you will see essentially that we discussed how Hertz is offloading about 21,000 of their EVs, which are predominantly Tesla vehicles. Now, in recent months, Teslas have depreciated quite a lot faster in an accelerating rate in comparison to previous years. Now, most cars do depreciate after you buy them, but Teslas had been holding their value better than most, and then all of a sudden, in 2023, we saw a huge devaluation because Tesla had lowered their prices themselves. And with the overall economic environment, with interest rates rising, less discretionary spending available, less people were purchasing these more mid to premium cars. And so you saw sales accelerate at a slower pace in general across the EV market. Now, of course, Teslas are on paper the best EV to purchase in terms of range, speed, and features. They are not the most luxurious, nor the best built, nor the prettiest. But I think as an overall package, if you want an EV, they're the most viable option right now. That being said, a lot of other EVs are struggling to get off dealer lots. I drive by the Subaru dealership and they just have the entire front row full of Solterras. Same at Toyota with BZ4Xs, same at Ford with their Ford Lightnings and Mach-E's. So generally, EVs are not selling well. Now, couple this with the huge growth in Tesla purchases over the last few years. They're selling, the Tesla Model Y is one of the best selling vehicles in the world now, and the 5th best selling car in the United States overall. So it has a huge following, which means there's a lot of cars on the road, which means there is also a lot of cars that get in accidents, need service, etc. But the service centers have not kept up with the amount of cars sold. So you see increasingly longer wait times and lead times for getting these repaired. Now, for you and me, with our personal insurance, this is usually not as drastic an issue as it would be for a fleet buyer, because we have our own insurance, and a lot of times they'll give us options of where to take it. Sometimes it's only one place, but it might be 2 or 3. And so that kind of helps a little bit to alleviate that. But when you have a fleet of tens of thousands of Teslas, and a lot of people are really beating on these cars. When you rent them, you're pushing the accelerator all the way down, you're getting in accidents. They're really pushing these cars. They're going through tires, they're going through brakes just because people want to test the limits of a Tesla. They've never driven an electric car, etc. They're gonna need service a lot sooner, a lot more frequently, and that means not only are they being in the shop for longer because it's harder to get parts or get them serviced, so they're not only longer wait times, but they're also not being rented out, so they're not making money for Hertz. And so all of this together has caused Hertz to write down the values of these cars on their books, because frankly they've mostly, the depreciation has hurt them the most, the resale values. So essentially their average loss on a Tesla right now is about $26,000. That's why if you go to Hertz's own Hertz car sales site, you see these very marked down Teslas, some of them in the low 20,000 range for a standard range plus Model 3, and in the 30s for a Model Y. So that is Hertz, okay? Now, if you want to look at the more broader Tesla market, aside from the Hertz vehicles, the Model 3 has really lost a lot of value. Broadly speaking, if you buy a private party dealership or directly from Tesla as a used vehicle, you can still find these cars in the 20s, in the 30s of thousands. And these cars are performance models, long-range models, some of them with enhanced or full self-driving. So they have expensive options as well, but they're all generally well under the 40,000, well under even 30,000 in a lot of cases. So I would say, based on my last video, a lot of people commented that you should never buy a previously rental car, used car, because people beat on them. I totally agree with that. I personally would not buy one. But if you're the type of person who doesn't really care about that and really just wants the best deal, period, and you're just looking at it on paper, sure, you can go to Hertz and get one. And they are, a little bit cheaper. Now, I think they might have some more issues down the line? Perhaps. But I think the stigma of buying a rental car as a used car might change in the future, just because electric cars have less moving parts. There's less things that can go wrong with them in terms of mechanics, right? And so even though you are pushing the vehicle, you are driving it hard, a lot of the components that would traditionally be stressed a lot, being a transmission, being the motor, those are just not prevalent in a Tesla vehicle. And so yes, you still have a motor and you have the battery, but the batteries have been shown to drive for hundreds of thousands of miles on the original battery with minimal degradation. So I think on that front, you shouldn't be too worried. There's been a lot of news about battery replacement costs on some vehicles. Now, those replacement costs were not for Teslas. That was for Hyundai, Kias. And so yes, they're really high, and yes, a lot of the cost of a electric car is in the battery, just like a lot of the cost of a gas car is between the motor and the transmission and related components. So of course, the battery is very expensive, but at least we have now over a decade of track record for Teslas and their overall reliability in terms of the battery. So I wouldn't be too worried about that part. Other things like the durability of the interior, things like that. Since there is a lot less in the interior, there's also a lot less to get messed up. So there's that as well. So now we've talked about Hertz. We've talked about the overall Tesla market and how you can even go on Tesla's website and find these cars pretty cheap. Now let's talk about in general when buying a used car that used to be a rental car. Now we've seen a very interesting thing happen over the last couple years. So during COVID, a lot of rental car companies actually sold a lot of their vehicles because they were higher value and they were not getting rented as much. And then once travel picked up again, they had to go back and buy those same cars back from people, or just go buy random cars. And so now we have a weird mix of vehicles in rental fleets. Some are older, higher mileage than traditionally. Rental cars will usually be sold around 50, 60,000 miles or after 2 or 3 years. Now we're seeing much older vehicles with much more miles. So I think it's even worse now to buy a used previous rental car than it was even before, because before there were a lot newer cars. Rental car companies were refreshing their fleets very often, and we just haven't been seeing that as of late. I think it's starting to pick back up again, but you're still seeing older, higher mileage vehicles. Even, we recently were in Florida, we rented a vehicle from, I think it was Avis, and it was a premium car. They gave us an Acura MDX. However, it was the previous gen. It was around the 2019 model year, and you could tell this thing had been used. It was at around 75,000 miles, and of course, the premium cars are usually kept a little bit longer, but that was a little bit excessive, even though it was Avis and not something like Enterprise or Hertz. But it wasn't budget or dollar either, so it's interesting. Now, general rule, I would say, try to stay away from the rental car specs, or well, the rental car used cars, but also rental car specs. Rental car spec being, it's usually closer to a base model, so not a lot of frills. And so in any case, I would say stay away from them just because they're pushed hard. People don't treat them very well as if it was their own vehicle. They beat on them, they race them, they take them off road, they do things that they shouldn't be doing with them. But that, you know, you probably have seen that, can relate to that, have done that. And so just from that experience, you know, it's probably not a good idea. Just like it's not a good idea to buy a car that had been used for test drives. Like I would not buy a demo vehicle from Tesla, because I know a lot of people who get those cars just to test out how fast they can go and how quick they can take corners. And so they've really been beaten on. And so essentially that's kind of my rebuttal to my previous video about this. And I hope that helps to, you know, answer and clear up some things about the whole Hertz situation, about used Teslas. I still think they're a really good deal. And if you can get a lower mileage one, they are good cars. They are reliable. They're not super well built in terms of panel gaps and things like that. But as far as reliability, it is good, because there's not a lot that has gone wrong in the grand scheme of how many cars they've sold. They have been quite reliable in that sense. You know, they'll get you from point A to point B. There are some cosmetic things, but in general, if you just need a car to get you from place to place, it's pretty great, especially for people who don't actually care about cars and just need a form of mobility. It's probably the best option, and it's very tech forward and things like that. I'm gonna make a video, I'm gonna film it tomorrow, and it's gonna be all about the cold experience in an electric car. So how do they do with cold weather, charging in the cold weather? What do you see with battery degradation and range degradation in the cold, and how does it cope with it? So we're gonna do that video, because you probably have seen in Chicago, there was a bunch of Teslas and other cars, Chevy Bolts, Kia Niros, Mustang Mach-E's, that were all on trailers because they couldn't charge in the cold weather. Now it's not that cold here in comparison to Chicago. It's not 0 Fahrenheit, but it is cold. It was close to that cold, and we got a lot of snow. So we can do kind of a comparison in that way and just try to see how it does in the cold. Of course, you'll see some range loss, but let's really see in the real world. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you appreciate my videos. I try to give all the right facts, and if there's ever anything I can clear up, I always try to respond to comments that you guys leave in below. So please leave any questions or anything you want cleared up down below, and I'll try to get to all of them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Catch you in the next one.